Evansville, Heterotopia. Heterotopia is a concept in human geography elaborated by philosopher Michel Foucault to describe places and spaces that function in non-hegemonic conditions. These are spaces of otherness, which are neither here nor there, that are simultaneously physical and mental, such as the space of a phone call or the moment when you see yourself in the mirror. Walter Russell Mead has written, "Utopia is a place where everything is good. Dystopia is a place where everything is bad. Heterotopia is where things are different. That is, a collection whose members have few or no intelligible connections with one another. In general, a heterotopia is a physical representation or approximation of a utopia, or parallel space that contains undesirable bodies to make a real utopian space possible, like a prison." Notes on this ambiguous utopia. When I draw, I scribble. I place trace paper over the scribble and connect the lines that I like. The chaos becomes people lounging, rolling hills, pools of water, houses, gardens, amphitheaters, barns, etc. Urban planning can be understood much the same way. We can reorganize the lines of chaos, drawing out what makes sense to us without a template. Using what we have, even if we can't make sense of the whole, we can make something more meaningful of the few parts that we can grasp. Something about chaos is that it is not without order, but has infinite orders. In 1900, in poorer districts of Paris, one toilet generally served 70 residents. Le Corbusier, for one, was horrified by such conditions. "All cities have fallen into a state of anarchy," he remarked. This is from The Architecture of Happiness by Alain de Botton. Here, Corbusier uses anarchy interchangeable with chaos. If we define anarchy by ourselves, instead of leaving it to professionals or history, we can redefine the city. We can set new limits. We can draw new lines. These are the lines that Corbusier drew. Skyscrapers to accommodate 40,000 people and with lots of toilets. When I lay trace paper over Corbusier's drawing, I make something of a different scale. This could be in Corbusier's Paris, a long walk from the towers, at the top of a hill in the park, a ramshackle silo, a community hall spanning between treetops, a collective house in the background with patio, a large pond in the foreground, a mishmash of farmhouse with a black flag hanging from the awning. I could say that this is anarchy in the city, at the scale of companions, of manageable land, in a rift of woods with compostable toilets. Using the same materials, Le Corbusier's lines, I could build what I want. When we define a thing, be it a city or anarchy, we set limits to it. We draw its edges, length and size. We decide where it converges and where it diverges. However, as long as our desire is the determining factor, the whole is dynamic and the limits are open-ended. In The Owner Builder in the Cold, The Politics of Building Your Home, co-author and self-proclaimed anarcho-decentralist Ken Kern remarks on the DIY building experience of psychiatrist Carl Jung. Significantly, the building was many years in the making, and therefore symbolic of the slow, metered growth of his own consciousness. Jung said of his project, "I build the house in sections, always following the concrete needs of the moment. Only afterwards did I see how all the parts fitted together, and that a meaningful form had resulted." This section is ended with this, quote, ancient Chinese proverb, "The man who finishes house is dead." Another author and builder who recognized the importance of impermanence to limits was architect Cedric Price. Price held a demolitions license and advocated for raids of his constructions on more than one occasion, believing, as Jung did, to follow the concrete needs of a moment might entail bulldozing the concrete that was needed in the earlier moment. Other projects of Price's worked with open-ended limits and impermanent lines. Price developed small structures that could be moved by people about the city and installed congruent to the flow of human movement. So one of these small structures might be set against the entrance to a building and seem to be the entrance. But when stepped into, you might find a hot tub, a video screen, a table set for tea, and one could step right through on their way into the building. And so it did act as an entrance. The structure could be set many places: in the middle of sidewalks, wedged between buildings, in empty fields or parking lots. One of his more famous projects was a building with a crane built in overhead, and all the rooms built as self-supporting structures. So you could use the crane to move rooms around, stacking them, lining them up, opening up the middle to create a large center room. Price determined to build an environment which the purpose of was to be affected by those using it. Price said dialogue might be the only excuse for architecture. A bold point to get down is that we do affect our environments, and they affect us. In Desmond Morris's book, The Human Zoo, he expands on the civilized trend toward confinement and the self-destructive behaviors people use to cope. In one section, he describes dominating those confined with you as a way people cope, and says, "It is not enough to have power. One must be observed to have power. You have to demonstrate your power. Your potential to impact your environment must be exhibited." This dynamic might be the crux of the bored society of the spectacle. Systemic or institutional power often has enormous buildings as obvious monoliths of their power. Colin Ward, in a collection of essays titled Vandalism, picks up on the smaller signs of power. A broken window can convey that random people have power, and a boarded-up window can mean that the people in the monoliths have more control of that power. Morris suggests that this example of Ward's is significant, and that the board is reactive, and those in control are telling that they are not in total control. It becomes a skill to read the landscape and understand where the seams are tearing, where time has eaten holes, where the cinders will catch, and which strands will fray beyond the edges. What we might be trying to foster is a craft, much like cartography. Make a map of where the population is already acting outside the intended use of an area, where crime is congruent to the flow of human movement, where rattling the bars of the cage has shook them loose, where people have exhibited the will and desire to move lines. These points are actually drawn in Urban Planning and Revolt, a spatial analysis of the December 2008 uprisings in Athens. Urban space operates as a symbol of power and authority, as a signal of overall dominance in political and everyday life. If the dominant is a person who has the capacity to change the rules, the capacity to install an exception, then the revolted were dominant over the production of their space. They were producers of a rupture in the everyday life of the city. In the zine Anarchist Urban Planning and Place Theory, its author, Olympia Tveter, deducts, if geography is the study of a place and the study of unique differentiations at a location and how that location relates to other locations, then geography is, in a very rudimentary way, the study of environmental differentiations, and a place is a perception of unique differentiation in a physical location. You are in a specific place because you sense its defining unique characteristics, whether physical or something else. The unique differentiation in this physical location, Evansville, is our agency, our realizing of the potential to affect our location. Evansville is the space in which our resonance, like string theory, shapes a geography, where our bodies determine ecology, where our hands leave prints and our conspiracies take place. We define Evansville. Tveter says, planning and design literature almost all appears to revolve around the nature of ownership. The structure of owner-non-owner is everywhere. Evansville's maps use a geography that differentiates what is owned and who owns it, not who uses it and how they use it. But we want to map what we can grasp. In The Future of Vandalism, N.J. Hobrocken writes, drawing the distinction between ownership or property and possession. We may possess something which is not our property, and conversely something may be our property which we do not possess. Property is a legal term, but the idea of possession is inextricably connected with action. To possess something, we have to take possession. Something becomes our possession because it shows traces of our existence. Houbraken goes on to tell what might be done with the structure of ownership. The question is not whether we have to adjust with difficulty to what has been produced with even more difficulty, but whether we make something which from the beginning is totally part of ourselves, for better or worse. The only way in which the population can make its impression on the immense armada which has gotten stranded around our city center is to wear them out. Destruction is the only way left. To take possession of the place we live is to go to war. The unique differentiation of the place of war is destruction. The mapping of the state's offensive is the official destruction. Demolition, neglect, highways, businesses, etc. The mapping of the insurgency is vandalism, necessity, communalism, neglect, the transgression of lines, the breaking of limits, trespassing, etc. This discussion of difficulty is brought forward in War and Architecture by Lebbeus Woods. The flow of information between people on a communal scale bears a conceptual resemblance to the remnants of war in the Old City. It is rational in its intentions, but unpredictable in its effects. Architecture must learn to transform the violence, even as violence knows how to transform the architecture. In the spaces voided by destruction, new structures are injected, difficult to occupy. Free spaces are, at their inception, useless and meaningless spaces. They become useful and acquire meaning only as they are inhabited by particular people. Traditional links with centralized authority, with deterministic and coercive systems, are disrupted. People assume the benefits and burdens of self-organization. The new spaces of habitation, constructed on the existential remnants of war, build upon the shattered form of the old order a new category of order inherent only in present conditions. There is an ethic and moral commitment in such an existence, and therefore a basis for community. Acceptance of the scar, by articulating differences, divides and joins together, mandates a society founded on differences, not similarities between people and things. The city of self-responsible people exhibits its unique scars. Useless and meaningless spaces. This is what Woods recommends we build. Spaces with no purpose, but to be given purpose by those inclined to use them. However, Woods understands that this inclination is not one of whimsy, but one of being at war. This giving of purpose is the meeting place of nihilism and existentialism. In Ethics of Ambiguity, Simone Beauvoir describes the nihilist as negating meaning, and the existentialist as choosing the void of negation as the space to place meaning. In a way, capitalism makes the project of the nihilist simple, as asserted in nihilist communism. Capitalism organizes us. Capitalism reduces, but does not negate, all things to an economic derivative. The capitalist urban planner has, intentionally or not, been busy with the rational projection of the reproduction of sameness, a war of leveling. This redundancy allows for the ease of killing all birds with one stone. It has made space for the realization that all things are possible. That's Shestov. All things are permissible. It's Os Congacheros. And all's fair in love and war. Et al. The project of the nihilist urban dweller is to negate the meaning of spaces and make them meaningless. Capitalism's project is similar. It is the project of simulation, a meaningless simulation. The existential urban dweller doesn't fill this void, but uses it for the unpredictable, in spaces within spaces. Giorgio Agamben says of an absolute unrepresentable community, that it is located in an unrepresentable space, which the proper name of is ease. The term ease in fact designates, according to its etymology, the space adjacent, the empty place where each can move freely, in a semantic constellation where special proximity borders on opportune time and convenience borders on the correct relation. They say that this use is the most difficult task. Here isn't a design for utopia. Here we are in hell. But this coming community is existing in between, in a purgatory, in the possibility of hell or heaven. In Richard Sennett's book, Uses of Disorder, they write, "People have learned in their individual lives the very tools of avoiding pain later to be shared together in a repressive, coherent community myth. The myth of a common us is an act of repression, not simply because it excludes outsiders or deviants from a particular community, but because of what it requires of those who are the elect, the included ones. This inability to deal with disorder is inevitable when people shape their common lives so that their only sense of relatedness is the sense in which they feel themselves to be the same. It is because people are uneasy and intolerant with ambiguity and discord in their own lives that they do not know how to deal with painful disorder in a social setting. We choose to use the myth of hell to burn away the memories of a communal history that never happened. The existentialist notes that the design of hell has no exits, only cells for confined security. Our project is to suffer the intrusion of others by necessity. We cannot blow up a social relation, but social relations can be explosive. This existential project is to learn how to live in hell, always on fire, making the best of the worst of people. War is difficult, and a way of suffering. The spaces we build must allow for this, as well as freedom. Such a place is hell. Hell, with the sinners, criminals, unrepentant, damned, forsaken, and free. Growing up, two of the locations given for hell were one, the center of the earth, beneath our feet, sloshing back and forth, never hitting bottom as the world rotates. And two, an eternal memory of our lives, reliving every imperfect moment, forever responsible for our mistakes. In both cases, hell is terrestrial. In both cases, the spectacle is nothing more than an image of a happy unification, surrounded by desolation and fear, at the tranquil center of misery. Hell, because in the dichotomy of either-or, as well as the in-between either-or of the purgatory, we choose hell, because we do not choose the bliss of oblivion, the passivity of the object waiting to be acted upon or chosen. We are not the elect. We do not watch for the elected. Hell, because we choose, though we are unqualified to choose. Hell, because poverty is miserable, space is alienating, boredom is torment, and survival is hopeless. Evansville is hell, where we are allowed to do whatever we want, and we will suffer our own effectivity. Ursula K. Le Guin said of anarchism, "It is choosing to be responsible for the choices you make." Our anarchism, our Evansville, is hell, because heaven is given to us, made for us, purged, purified, and prepared, but we choose hell. Historic nihilists in Russia were educated youth who chose to live among the peasant villages because there they believed life was closer to its origins, capable of subsistence, and desperate for revolution. When this revolution failed to materialize, they turned to the destruction of the world it was to replace. Today we nihilists might try again. Capitalism has eaten to decay the matter of life for its poor. America has become, for many poor people here, a purgatory, a place of opportunity, a place of potential to reach heaven or be damned to hell. My suggestion is that we choose hell. A heaven here only damns the others to hell. Hell here displaces heaven and allows for it to be located anywhere. Anywhere Evansville. A home for nihilists, a place built on a space of society. From beneath behind, about, adjacent, and entangled to a non-local parallel, entangled to necessities of the particular. Evansville is empty to such a degree that absence and alienation are the relation most in common. And though for most a city is defined by the density within geographic limits, we choose a density of interactions, a density of meaning. Hell exists in a concentrated or diffuse form depending on the necessities of the particular stage of misery, which it denies and supports. Different forms of the same alienation confront each other, all of them built on real contradictions which are repressed. We will be unrepressed, unelected. We will unleash the beast and open the gate to hell, not acting out revolution on the stage of misery, but revolting against misery itself will tear apart the stage and decimate the theater of war. The architect of this hell is built from a blueprint on the underside of Borges' map, which hides the natural landscape, and so gives to us a secret world beneath it, a unity of misery. The art of darkness, deception in urban operations depicts this secrecy, in a classic image of hell as a labyrinth. A large city provides several planes of urban high ground, and in many instances a subterranean level in addition. Mobility is a great strength. Using back alleys and sewers, slipping through basements, buildings provide cover and concealment, limit or increase fields of observation and fire, and canalize, restrict, or block movement of forces, especially mechanized forces. Again, capitalism has already instituted this deception. Deception is information designed to manipulate the behavior of others by inducing them to accept a false or distorted representation of their environment, physical or social, or political. Capitalism's mode of alienation has displaced people from their environment, both in removing them from a stable location as well as rendering them incapable of mentally establishing their bearings. People tend to subjectively picture the place they live, eliminating buildings and thoroughways. This was intentionally used by the KGB in the USSR, where their own maps included buildings and areas that the government didn't want outside forces to be aware of. So upon invasion, enemy forces would be lost in the reality they'd find. It's from Urban Guerrilla Warfare by Anthony James Joyce. This can be used to the advantage of the urban insurrectionist because the places of ease and the secret passageways already exist. We already use them to move between the spectacle of the reified world like dark matter surrounding the visible universe. We just have to use them now for attack. Miserable, depressed, alone, and tortured, but in solidarity. From hell, solidarity means attack. Total Resistance, Swiss Army Guide to Guerrilla Warfare and Underground Operations, forwarded by a retired colonel from the U.S. Army. It's a manual for Swiss citizenry on how to insurrect if occupied by an outside force. In the section General Uprising, it says, procure a lot of city maps for yourselves. Lease apartments, shops, or even houses where you can take up position long beforehand, i.e. at bridges, intersections, train stations, telephone offices, exit routes, etc. In a panel titled Security of an Underground Meeting, it makes these suggestions. Reports are made over civilian phones using code words. Pose as a newspaper reader. Appearance of police vehicles will be reported. Pose as a person resting in a park. Surveillance of police barracks must be reported. And pose as lovers. Approach of squad car reported. But we don't need to pose. We are already actually reading, loving, sitting in parks, etc. We have to be vigilant that we're doing it while at war, that we're being watched because our regular lives are in conflict of our enemies' regulations. Life in hell is life at war, and will be damned to hell one way or the other. The point is to choose it. Death comes to us no matter whether we take a position against it or not. But as the bank robber and prison escapee Mesrine said, no one kills me until I say so. We can choose to die fighting a war where we take ground, live in a place devastated by our intentions, burn ourselves out hotter than any blue flame of hell. Life is suffering. I suggest we suffer in love, in passion, and in rage. It will look something like this life looks. because it is this life. Because again, my point is that we are at war. We have been this whole time and we will be. As Colin Ward wrote, the future will be just like this, only more so. Let's be more. A density of diffuse commonality, a sudden conclusion of a question, a big bang, a natural phenomenon, normal people, uncontrolled. Builders of our own architecture, we dismantle our own philosophy by constructing our own incomprehensible biology. Tear down the fences, get lost in the commons. When we control our bodies, it will be far less important for us to control the world around us. But now, we desperately desire private places to do with our bodies what we like. To find those places, we must do with the world around us what we like.